The world was broken. 3 billion people were gone, taken by fire, hunger, and the merciless hand of the invaders. Cities that once glowed with light now lay in ruins. Their towers burned, and their streets filled with ash. The air was heavy, with smoke and silence, a silence so deep it felt like the earth itself had stopped breathing. The invaders believed they had won. They moved through the empty cities with no fear, laughing in their alien voices. They saw the ruins of human armies and thought humanity was finished. But they did not know the truth. The earth was never empty, and the silence was not weakness. It was waiting. From the orbit above, the planet looked dark. Massive scars of war cut across continents, glowing like wounds. Alien warships circled in the sky. Watching with pride, they had taken the oceans, poisoned the rivers, and broken the armies of man. Yet something in the shadows of Earth remained. Untouched, something hidden so deep that even the invaders could not sense it. Among the survivors, hope was almost dead. Scattered groups of humans hid in the ruins. Afraid to speak, they whispered stories of old legends, monsters and demons from Earth's past. But those were only whispers, stories to make the children sleep in the dark. Or so they thought. The aliens mocked humanity. They said humans were weak animals, crawling in caves, begging for life. But one alien commander was not at peace. He walked through the ruins of New York, his soldiers cheering their victory, and he looked at the broken walls. The strange symbols scratched into the stone, symbols made by human hands before death. They were not prayers, not art, but warnings. He felt a chill. Though his species did not know fear, the earth was quiet, but deep beneath the soil, the silence was not empty. It was alive. Machines older than the war were waking. Vaults built under mountains and seas hummed with power. The humans had built more than guns and bombs. They had built something else, something too dangerous to release unless the world was already dying. The silence was the sound of chains breaking. Slowly, heavily, one by one, the locks of the vaults were opening. The earth itself seemed to tremble in the night. In the ruins of the cities, survivors felt the ground shake. They thought it was another alien attack. But when no fire came from the sky, their fear turned to confusion. Something else was moving. Under the ground, the alien soldiers noticed too. They scanned the planet, searching for human weapons, but found nothing. Their machines could not read what was happening. They saw only shadows and strange energy spikes from deep underground. They dismissed it, thinking the planet itself was breaking apart. But the commander who had seen the symbols was not convinced. The humans, though broken, felt something stirring in their hearts. For years they had only known despair. But now, when the earth shook, some of them smiled. They remembered whispers of a last plan, a final weapon hidden by the old governments. They called it the sleeping giants. No one had ever seen them. No one knew if they were real. But as the nights grew louder with the rumbling of the ground, the whispers returned, and hope, sharp and dangerous, returned with them. In the shadows of the mountains, a boy asked his mother, "Are the monsters coming to eat us?" The mother looked into the dark sky, filled with alien ships. "No," she said softly, "the monsters are not for us." The earth had been silent because it was listening, silent because it was preparing, silent because it was waiting for the right moment. And that moment was almost here. The invaders did not understand the nature of Earth. They thought it was just a rock filled with weak creatures. But Earth was more than that. It was a planet, shaped by war, by survival, by endless struggle. And its children had learned to adapt in ways no enemy could predict. The silence was ending. The survivors felt it in their bones. The aliens saw it in their broken machines. And the earth itself roared from deep inside. The monsters were waking. The invaders walked among the ruins of Earth as if they owned it. Their tall frames glistened under the broken sunlight, their armor shining with the blood of battles long won. To them, humanity was nothing but a forgotten whisper. A defeated race that once dreamed of stars but now crawled in caves. They moved through the empty streets with laughter that echoed against burned walls, laughter that carried the sound of cruelty on the alien command ship orbiting above the ruined planet. The Supreme Warlord addressed his council. 3 billion gone, he declared, his voice calm but sharp like a blade. The resistance broken, their armies shattered, their leaders dead or hiding like rats. Around him, the alien officers bowed, their eyes glowing with pride. To them, this war was already over. The humans were erased, their history finished. But the arrogance of the invaders blinded them to the truth. Across the shattered continents, alien patrols mocked the humans they found. In the ruins of London, a squad dragged starving survivors into the streets, forcing them to kneel. They called the humans ghosts of a dead race. In the ashes of Shanghai, another group painted their alien symbols over broken human monuments, claiming them as trophies. Everywhere, they treated Earth as conquered soil. But Earth was not conquered. Not yet. One commander, known as Valor, was different. He walked through the remains of New York, his eyes fixed not on the ruins, but on the strange marks left on the walls, scratched symbols, carved deep into concrete. They were not human words, but warnings, drawn with desperate hands before death. The soldiers around him ignored them, laughing, but Valor felt unease. The silence of Earth was too heavy, too controlled. It was not the silence of defeat, but the silence of something waiting. In orbit, alien scientists studied the strange energy spikes that had begun to appear underground. They dismissed them as natural quakes, the final collapse of a dying planet, but some readings were unusual. The energy carried patterns, like signals, like a heartbeat. One scientist dared to suggest it could be human technology awakening. But the council silenced him with mockery. How can a dying race build what we cannot detect? They sneered. Arrogance drowned their caution. Meanwhile, hidden in the ruins, humans whispered about the shaking Earth. They remembered stories told before the war, stories of secret vaults sealed under oceans and mountains. Not vaults of treasure, not vaults of safety, but vaults of weapons, monsters born of science and fear. Many thought it was only myth, but the ground itself told a different story now. The survivors dared not speak too loud, afraid the aliens would hear their hope. But their eyes, long empty, now carried sparks. Back on Earth's surface, alien troops grew careless. They hunted survivors not for war, but for sport. They recorded their cruelty and sent it to their homeworlds as proof of their victory. One soldier raised the skull of a fallen human soldier and declared, "This is all they are." But even as he spoke, the ground beneath his feet trembled. He laughed, thinking it was just the planet dying. But he was wrong. Valor stood apart from his troops, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He had studied many conquered worlds before, but none felt like this. Every planet fell with cries. But Earth had fallen with silence, a silence that felt alive. He remembered the symbols scratched on the walls. He remembered the scientists' warning, and for the first time in years, he felt something his people had forgotten, a shadow of fear. The warlord in orbit laughed at his worries. "Fear not the silence," he told his council. "Fear is for the weak, and the humans are weaker than any we have crushed." The officers cheered. They believed their empire unstoppable. They believed no force in the galaxy could resist them. But arrogance is the weapon that cuts its own master. The survivors of Earth felt the tremors grow stronger each night. In the caves, a mother told her child, "The monsters are not for us." In the forests, an old soldier whispered to the young, "This is not the end. This is the waiting." And far underground, the vaults pulsed with light. The chains of silence were breaking. The aliens, blind in their victory, ignored the signs. Their scanners failed, their pride louder than their reason. They thought Earth was finished, but Earth was not finished. Earth was only beginning. Valor alone stood uneasy. When he slept, He dreamed of shadows rising from the soil. He dreamed of giants with eyes of fire. He dreamed of the silence breaking. Into a roar, he told his superiors of his visions, but they laughed. You see ghosts where there are none. They mocked, but the ghosts were real. The silence was real. And the arrogance of the invaders would soon awaken a nightmare they could never imagine. The stars above Earth burned with alien warships. The soil below burned with secrets. The people left alive whispered in the dark. And the monsters waited. The silence of Earth was ending. And when it ended, the arrogance of the invaders would turn to terror. The nights on Earth had grown uneasy. The stars above still carried alien ships, their shadows falling across broken cities. But below the ground, deep under the mountains, the seas and the ruins, something else stirred. Something ancient, something hidden, something built in silence and buried with purpose. At first, it was only tremors. The ground shook. Small stones fell from cave ceilings. Survivors thought it was nothing more than Earth collapsing under its wounds. But the tremors grew stronger, louder, like the sound of giant hearts beating. Beneath the soil, animals sensed it first. The few left alive fled from valleys and forests, their cries sharp with terror. The humans hiding in ruins felt the rumbling in their bones. And though they feared, a strange spark flickered inside them, a spark called hope. The aliens dismissed it. Their scanners showed strange energy surges, but their arrogance blinded them. They said the planet was dying, splitting apart, they said. The energy was only the death cry of Earth. But one commander, Valor, knew better. He had seen the symbols, carved deep into walls before death. He had heard the warnings of human survivors, half whispers, half madness, and when he stood in the ruins of New York at night, he felt the ground itself breathing. The vaults had been sleeping for decades, hidden by human hands who knew they would never see tomorrow. They were built not in secret bunkers of war, but in the very bones of the earth, buried under mountains, locked under oceans, wrapped in chains of metal and fire. Inside them, machines older than the invasion stirred. Lights flickered to life, red, blue, green, glowing like the eyes of beasts. And then came the sound, not a roar, not yet, but the heavy grinding of chains, the groan of doors built for eternity, slowly opening. In the caves of the Himalayas, survivors woke to a thunder so deep it cracked stone. Children cried, mothers hushed them, but even the strongest men could not hide their fear. It was not the sound of alien fire, nor the sound of falling bombs. It was the sound of something massive moving under their feet, something that had been waiting. One child asked his grandfather, "What is it?" The old man, who once served as a soldier, whispered, "It is the last promise of Earth." And in his eyes burned both fear and pride. Far across the sea, in the depths of the Atlantic, alien submarines scanned the ocean floor. They found cracks glowing with strange light. Heat rose from the deep trenches, bubbles rising like the planet itself was boiling. The commanders laughed, calling it tectonic collapse, but their laughter died when their sonar caught a sound, a slow, heavy thud, like something enormous dragging chains across the seafloor. Moments later, the ocean trembled, and one of their vessels vanished into the abyss. Swallowed whole, the others reported nothing, because there was nothing left to report. The survivors on land saw signs too. In the forests of Siberia, trees fell though no wind blew. In the deserts of Africa, the sand shifted, rolling in waves like something crawling beneath it. In South America, mountains cracked, stones rolling down their sides as if pushed by an invisible hand. And everywhere, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The aliens grew restless. Their patrols began to vanish. Squads sent to investigate the tremors never returned. Scanners failed, showing only static. Where the vaults pulsed with energy, the supreme warlord dismissed it, declaring the planet broken. But whispers spread among the soldiers, whispers of shadows moving in the night, whispers of shapes too large to be human, too powerful to be machines. Valor stood in silence as he watched the night sky over Earth's ruins. He remembered the warning carved into the walls. They are not for us. They are for you. He understood. Now, the humans had not built these things to save themselves. They had built them to punish their enemies, monsters not born of nature, but born of science. Weapons too dangerous to unleash in life, locked away until the end, and the end had come. In the ruins of London, an alien patrol marched through broken streets, their laughter loud, their arrogance unshaken. Then the ground cracked, splitting. Beneath their feet, a single glowing claw broke through stone, massive, curved, dripping with molten heat. The soldiers opened fire, their weapons screaming, but the claw did not move. It was only one of many. And as the earth split wider, the patrol saw a shadow rise, something vast, something with eyes that burned like suns. The patrol's screams never left the ruins. The first awakening was not the last. Across the world, the vaults broke open one by one. In the jungles, in the mountains, in the frozen wastes, the monsters of Earth rose, each one different, each one built for war. Some crawled, some flew. Some swam through oceans like living storms. They were not human, yet they were the creation of humanity's last will. And they did not awaken for mercy. They awakened for vengeance. The survivors watched from hiding, their fear mixed with awe. They saw alien machines, once unstoppable, torn apart like paper. They saw warships fall from the sky, dragged down by things with wings of fire. They saw oceans swallow fleets, mountains shake with the steps of giants. For the first time since the war began, the survivors smiled. For the first time, the invaders screamed. But the awakening was only beginning. The monsters were not endless, not infinite. Each one demanded a price from Earth itself. Each one pulled life from the soil, from the air, from the planet. Humanity had built them with desperation, not wisdom. And though they brought hope, they also brought danger. Valor knew this. He saw the first monster rise, its form half shadow, half fire. He saw it crush one of his warships with a single strike. He heard its roar shake the skies, and though his people were built without fear, his heart trembled. He whispered words his people had not spoken in centuries. This world is cursed. Above, the alien warlord still laughed. He refused to believe in fear. He refused to see the danger, but his laughter began to fade, because for the first time since their conquest, the invaders faced an enemy they could not understand, an enemy that did not fight for survival, but for vengeance. And the silence of Earth was now broken. The monsters had awakened. The first true battle began not with warning, but with silence. It was the kind of silence that even the aliens could not ignore. A silence too heavy, too sharp, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Alien patrols spread across the ruins of Earth stood alert, their laughter gone, their arrogance cracking. Because the ground itself was no longer steady, it was trembling, humming, carrying a rhythm like the pulse of a heart, far larger than any machine. In the ruins of London, the soldiers who had vanished days earlier were found, or at least parts of them were found. Twisted armor, broken weapons, bodies, shredded as though by claws too large to belong to any animal. Their commander dismissed it as human traps, but the soldiers knew better. They whispered to each other that something was hunting them in the shadows. And their fear was not wrong. The first monster revealed itself in the dead city of Moscow. Alien war machines had gathered there, repairing their broken fleets, their lights glowing across the ruined streets. Then came the sound, a low rumble, rising from the earth like thunder rolling through stone. Buildings collapsed as the ground split, and from the black crack rose something that defied description. A creature with skin like molten rock, eyes burning gold, and claws dripping with fire. Its body was taller than the broken towers. Its roar shook the sky. For a moment, the invaders froze. Then they opened fire. Beams of alien energy struck the beast, explosions ripping the streets apart. The monster staggered, but did not fall. It turned its burning eyes toward the soldiers, and with one swing of its claw, a warship fell from the sky like a toy. The soldiers screamed, their weapons blazing, but their shots only left scars that glowed before sealing again. The monster roared, and the city itself seemed to crumble with the sound. From orbit, the alien warlord watched the battle unfold. At first, he laughed, calling it nothing more than a large animal, but then his screens showed the truth. The beast was not natural. Its body was filled with patterns, designs too precise to be random. This was no animal. It was a weapon made by human hands. More vaults cracked open across the world. In the deserts of Africa, a creature of shadow and sand rose, its wings blotting out the sun. In the Pacific Ocean, something vast stirred beneath the waves, swallowing entire fleets in silence. In the forests of South America, the trees themselves seemed to come alive, moving with the steps of something older than history. Everywhere, the monsters awakened, and everywhere, the aliens fought. But there, arrogance met reality. Their strongest weapons, designed to conquer galaxies, barely slowed the creatures. Their fleets fired until the skies burned red, but the monsters only roared louder. Ships were torn from the air, ripped apart by claws, smashed by fists the size of mountains. The oceans boiled, the forests shook. The deserts screamed with storms of sand and fire, and for the first time, the invaders felt something they had forgotten across centuries of conquest. They felt fear. The survivors of Earth watched in silence. Hidden in caves and ruins, they saw the monsters tearing through the aliens. They saw warships fall, cities burn, oceans rise, and though they feared the monsters too, they felt something else deep inside. A savage joy. The monsters were not here to save them, but they were destroying the ones who had killed billions. And for the first time since the war began, humans dared to whisper a single word: revenge. In New York, Commander Vaylor watched as one of the beasts rose from the Hudson River. Its body was covered in steel plates, its eyes glowing with cold light. The creature moved with purpose, not like an animal, but like a soldier. Vaylor ordered his troops to fire. The air filled with energy blasts, missiles, fire. The creature did not fall. It reached out with a claw, seized one of the alien tanks, and crushed it as if it were glass. Then it turned its gaze on Vaylor. For the first time, the commander who had always felt only suspicion now felt terror. He understood that these monsters were not wild. They were weapons designed for one purpose only: to kill invaders. The supreme warlord, high above in orbit, raged. He ordered full bombardments, weapons that had destroyed countless worlds. The skies burned as fire rained down. Cities already ruined turned to glass. But when the smoke cleared, the monsters still moved, scarred, bleeding, but alive. One of them even raised its burning eyes to the sky, as if it knew where the warlord sat, and roared so loud the sound carried into the orbiting ships. For the first time in his long life, the warlord felt doubt. The battles grew worse. In the Pacific, the sea monster struck again, pulling entire carriers beneath the waves. Its back rose from the ocean like an island, its roar drowned by the crashing of storms. Alien fleets fired down into the water, but the abyss swallowed their light, and the screams of their crews were silenced by the deep. In the deserts, the sand-born monster stretched its wings, darkening the sun. Its body was made of shifting grains, constantly breaking and reforming. Blades of wind cut through alien aircraft, slicing them into pieces. The survivors on the ground stared up in awe. As the monster blotted out the sky, they whispered the name Stormbringer. Though they knew it was no god, It was their final weapon. The arrogance of the invaders shattered. They had believed themselves masters of the galaxy, but here, on this broken world, they met a force beyond their understanding. A force built from rage, from desperation, from the will of a dying species. They began to ask questions. How many monsters lay sleeping? How long had humans prepared? How much worse could it get? And the answer came in the silence between battles. The ground still trembled. Vaults still opened. Chains still broke. The awakening was not complete. What the invaders had seen was only the beginning. Valor stood on the ruins, watching fires burn across the city. He no longer mocked, no longer doubted. He whispered words his soldiers dared not repeat. This world is not dying, it is fighting. And his eyes turned to the horizon, where shadows moved, larger than mountains. He knew then that the arrogance of his people had doomed them, because Earth was not finished. Earth was only beginning. The first contact with the monsters had ended, and the invaders had learned a terrible truth. Humanity had been weak, but their creations were not. The monsters were awake, and they would not stop. Long before the invasion began, long before alien ships darkened the skies, Earth had already known fear. Not fear of the stars, but fear of itself. Wars had scarred the planet for centuries. Nations building weapons not to defend, but to destroy. Science marched forward, creating miracles with one hand and nightmares with the other. And deep inside government halls, secret voices asked a question too dangerous to speak in public. What if we lose the skies? They feared not only enemies from Earth, but something greater, something unknown. So plans were drawn in shadows, papers locked in vaults, words erased from history. The plan was called by many names. Project Revenant, Project Last Light, but most whispered it as one thing, the Monster Protocol. It began with genetics, with experiments too dark to be spoken of. Animals reshaped, human cells. Altered, machines fused with living flesh. At first they failed. The creations were unstable, monstrous in body, but weak in will. But failure never stopped them. Each experiment brought them closer. Each nightmare paved the way to the next. And finally, after years of silence, they succeeded. Deep in hidden laboratories, under mountains and oceans, humanity built giants, not beasts of myth, but living weapons. Part flesh, part machine, fueled by power no alien could ever imagine. They were too dangerous to unleash in peace, too terrible to walk among humanity. So they were sealed away, chained in vaults designed to hold them for centuries. The keys to those vaults were not in governments, not in armies, but in the earth itself. The monsters would only awaken when the world was broken, when silence fell, when the planet cried out. Humanity had given the earth its own guardians, not protectors, but punishers. The scientists who built them left warnings, symbols carved into walls, codes written into stone, words hidden in ruins. Do not call them unless the world is ending. And so, when the invasion came, when 3 billion died, when cities burned, the earth itself unlocked the chains. The survivors of Earth never knew the full story, but some remembered whispers, rumors of the old governments preparing for something unimaginable. The soldiers who fought in the last human armies had seen glimpses, shadows behind walls, sounds of roaring beneath the ground. They never spoke, bound by oaths of secrecy. But in their final days, some scratched symbols into walls, leaving warnings for the future. Warnings that Valor had seen, warnings that told the truth. Back in orbit, the alien warlord studied the battles with growing rage. His fleets had fought 1,000 wars across the galaxy, never losing, never retreating. But here, on this broken planet, his ships fell like rain. His armies were torn apart. He demanded answers from his scientists. "What are these things?" he roared. The scientists whispered, their voices low with unease. "They are not natural. They are not born of this planet's life. They are made. The warlord sneered. Made by who? And the scientist whispered the word that chilled even the alien council. Humans. The arrogance of the invaders cracked further. They had believed humanity weak, fragile, unworthy of resistance. But now they saw that weakness had hidden something deeper. Humans were not only fighters, they were creators, and in their desperation, they had created monsters, weapons not to save themselves, but to make their enemies suffer. In the ruins of Paris, survivors huddled together, listening as a monster walked above. Its footsteps shook the ground. Its roar cracked the sky. Some prayed to it, calling it an angel. Others hid, whispering that no human could control such things. But an old soldier, his face scarred by war, told them the truth. They are not angels. They are not demons. They are what we left behind. The flashbacks of history played across the minds of those who remembered. They recalled the secret. Laboratories hidden under Antarctica. They recalled the deep-sea vaults filled with machines sleeping like coffins. They recalled the endless arguments between generals and scientists. Some had feared the project, warning it would doom humanity. Others had demanded it, swearing it was the only path to survival. In the end, fear won, and the monsters were born. But there was a cost. Every monster required more than steel and science. They demanded energy, life force, the very essence of the planet itself. Each one awakened, drained the earth, pulling power from soil, air, and sea. The scientists had warned, we cannot build too many, or the planet itself will die. But the leaders ignored it. They believed the monsters would never be needed. They believed humanity would survive on its own. They were wrong now. As the aliens burned, the monsters walked. But every roar, every strike, every battle came with a price. The survivors could feel it. The air heavier, the soil weaker, the rivers drying. The earth was paying for its vengeance. And the monsters would not stop until the debt was paid. Vaylor, standing in the ruins of New York, began to piece it together. He remembered the survivors' whispers, the symbols, the old scars on walls. He realized these monsters were not random. They were a plan, a last desperate gift from humanity to its dying world. Not hope, not salvation, but vengeance. Vaylor turned to his soldiers. This is not war, he said, his voice heavy. This is judgment. In orbit, the warlord raged, ordering full planetary bombardment. Weapons fell from the skies, turning forests into fire, deserts into glass, oceans into boiling storms. But the monsters endured, rising from flames, roaring from smoke. Every weapon the aliens unleashed only made the creatures angrier. Every fleet destroyed left the warlord more desperate. And still the vaults opened, still the chains broke, still. The earth trembled. The survivors of Earth began to understand the truth, too. The monsters were not here to protect them. They were not shields. They were not saviors. They were weapons of rage, designed to punish, to destroy. Humanity had created them not for mercy, but for revenge. And though they fought the invaders, the survivors knew one day the monsters might turn on them too, because monsters did not know allies. Monsters only knew enemies. The hidden plan of humanity was revealed in fire and blood. It was not a plan for peace, not a plan for survival. It was a plan for annihilation. And now it walked upon the earth. The aliens who had once mocked humanity now screamed as their ships fell. The humans who had once prayed for salvation now watched in fear. And the monsters marched on, their roars echoing through the broken world. Earth had unleashed its last light, and that light was made of fire, chains, and vengeance. War of silence was over. Now came the war of thunder. Earth trembled not with whispers, but with roars, with explosions, with cries that split the sky. The monsters were awake, and the aliens were no longer conquerors. They were prey. It began in the Pacific. The sea rolled with waves taller than towers, storms screaming across the horizon. Alien fleets hovered above the water. their weapons glowing, their arrogance still unbroken. Then the ocean split apart. A shadow rose from the abyss. At first it looked like an island lifting itself from the deep, its back covered in jagged spines, glowing with molten fire. Then it moved, and the fleets realized it was alive. The monster opened its jaws, wide enough to swallow warships whole. It roared, and the sound shook the waves into storms. The aliens fired, beams of energy turning the sea to steam. But the creature's hide absorbed it, glowing brighter with each strike. Then it struck. One swing of its tail sent 10 ships crashing. Into the waves, one bite crushed a dreadnought into scrap. The ocean turned red, and the fleets screamed as the abyss swallowed them. In the deserts of Africa, the sand stormed like a living sea. The monster of dust and shadow spread its wings, blotting out the sun. Its body shimmered like a storm given shape, constantly breaking apart and reforming. Alien aircraft fired from above, missiles streaking through the haze. But the sand absorbed them, breaking metal into nothing. Then the monster unleashed its storm. Blades of wind sharper than steel. The aircraft shattered, their pieces raining into the dunes. And the survivors below whispered one word in awe: Stormbringer. In Siberia, a monster of stone and ice rose from the mountains. Its steps cracked the earth, avalanches falling behind it like echoes. Alien tanks fired, their weapons blasting holes into its rocky skin. But with every strike, it only grew larger, its wounds filling with more stone, more ice. It smashed through armies like a god of earth itself. Its roar was not sound, but vibration, shaking weapons apart, splitting armor into dust, and the aliens fled, their pride broken in the snow, in the skies over South America. Another horror revealed itself. This one was not fire or stone, but metal and wings. Its body shone with steel, its eyes cold with light. It flew faster than sound, tearing through warships like arrows through paper. Its talons cut ships in half. Its screeches cracked the air into thunder. Alien commanders screamed orders, but their fleets could not keep up. They fired blindly, weapons scorching the forests below. But the monster moved like lightning, unstoppable. And the survivors whispered its name, the Iron Bird. The battles raged across the planet. Everywhere the monsters rose, and everywhere the aliens fell. The skies burned with fire. The seas boiled with storms. The earth shook with the steps. Of giants, it was not war. It was slaughter. The invaders had believed themselves gods. But here, on earth, they were nothing but prey, caught in the jaws of vengeance. The survivors watched from hiding, their hearts torn between awe and fear. They cheered as alien ships fell, but they trembled as the monsters roared. They knew these creatures were not saviors. They were weapons, and weapons cared for nothing but destruction. One mother held her child close as the Iron Bird flew overhead. The child whispered, "Will it save us?" The mother closed her eyes. "It will kill them, but I do not know what it will do to us." Commander Vaylor saw the truth clearer than any alien. He watched his armies break, his fleets burn, his soldiers scream. He saw weapons that had destroyed empires crumble against Earth's fury. And he knew now what the humans had done. "They built these monsters not to live," he whispered. "They built them to make sure no enemy ever left this planet alive." In orbit, the supreme warlord raged. He ordered every fleet to attack. Every weapon unleashed, the skies turned into fire. Bombardments shaking the planet itself. Forests turned to ash, deserts to glass, cities to rubble. But still the monsters rose, scarred but unbroken. Some even grew stronger with each strike, feeding on the very weapons used against them. And for the first time, the warlord tasted fear. His people had conquered thousands of worlds, but never had they faced something like this. Never had they fought a planet that fought back. The war was no longer conquest, it was survival. Aliens who once marched with arrogance now ran with terror. They abandoned posts, fled into orbit, screamed into broken radios. Some begged for mercy, but the monsters gave none, because they were not built for mercy. They were built for vengeance. Pacific boiled as the sea monster rose higher, its spines glowing like burning mountains. It clashed with entire fleets alone, smashing ships into waves. Dragging carriers beneath the abyss, its roar split the skies, and alien soldiers covered their ears as blood poured from them. The Stormbringer swept across Africa, its wings spreading storms that swallowed cities whole. The Iron Bird cut through the skies, raining broken ships into jungles. A giant of stone marched across Siberia, crushing armies underfoot, shaking the very continent, and more still were awakening. Vaults cracking open across the world, shadows rising in the smoke. The earth itself seemed alive with rage. Every tremor, every storm, every roar carried the voice of vengeance. The survivors felt it, their bones vibrating with the fury of their own planet. The aliens felt it too, their technology failing, their fleets scattering, and in that chaos, the truth became clear. This was no simple war. This was punishment. Vaylor stood in the ruins of New York, his soldiers broken around him. He looked at the burning horizon, the monsters moving like gods of wrath, and he whispered to himself, "We should have never come here, above." The warlord made his final decision. If the planet could not be conquered, it would be destroyed. He ordered the ultimate weapon prepared, a weapon that could earn worlds into silence. His officers hesitated, their arrogance gone, their pride shattered, but he screamed at them, his voice filled with desperation. If Earth cannot be ours, let it be nothing. And so, while the monsters tore through fleets, while survivors prayed in shadows, while the planet itself roared with fury, the aliens prepared to end it all. The war of monsters versus aliens had reached its peak. And the next battle would decide not who won, but whether anything survived at all. The skies above Earth burned with endless fire. Alien fleets fell like meteors, their wreckage crashing into oceans and mountains. The monsters roared across the planet, their cries shaking cities into rubble, splitting deserts into storms, boiling seas into steam. But in orbit, the Supreme Warlord prepared the final weapon. It was called the Sun Killer. A weapon not meant for conquest, but for annihilation. It could burn a world until nothing remained but ash and glass. It had never been used, because no empire dared erase what could be ruled. But now the warlord had no choice. His fleets were falling, his armies shattered, his arrogance broken. He would not leave Earth in victory, but he refused to leave it alive. His officers trembled, their eyes filled with something their kind had forgotten. Fear. They hesitated, speaking of retreat, of abandoning the planet. But the warlord silenced them, his voice cold as steel. If Earth cannot be ours, then it will be nothing, and no one in the galaxy will dare stand against us again. The weapon began to charge. From orbit, a light brighter than the sun itself glowed. The survivors on Earth looked to the sky, their hearts filling with despair. The monsters themselves turned, their burning eyes lifting toward the heavens. Sensing what was coming, even they could not withstand such a strike. Commander Vaylor watched from the ruins of New York. He had once believed in conquest, in victory, in his people's arrogance. Now he saw the truth. His empire was broken not by humans, but by their creations, by Earth itself. And yet, as the weapon charged, he realized something more terrifying. The warlord's pride would not only kill Earth, it would kill everything that remained. He looked at his soldiers, broken, terrified, and for the first time, he made a choice. Vaylor raised his communicator. He spoke not to his fleet, not to his warlord, but to the survivors hidden in shadows. "They will burn your world unless we stop them," he said. The humans listened, silent, mistrust burning in their eyes. But Vaylor's voice carried no arrogance, only desperation. "I will not save you, I cannot. But I can buy you a chance. As the Sun Killer charged, the monsters moved. The sea beast rose from the Pacific, its spines glowing brighter than fire. The Stormbringer spread its wings across Africa, storms circling like shields. The Iron Bird soared through the skies, faster than sound, its claws reaching toward orbit. The giant of stone marched across Siberia, its steps shaking continents. They could not speak, but their fury was the language of Earth itself. They knew this was the final moment. If the weapon fired, the planet would end. And so they roared as one. The sound shook the skies, carried into orbit, reaching even the ears of the warlord. It was not a roar of beasts. It was the roar of a world. The warlord sneered. He ordered the firing sequence to begin. But in that moment, something unexpected happened. One of his own ships broke formation. Commander Vaylor had made his choice. He turned his cruiser toward the Sun Killer, engines burning, weapons firing. His officers screamed betrayal. But he ignored them. "This world is cursed," he whispered. "But it deserves to live more than we deserve to rule." And with a final strike, he rammed his ship into the weapon's core. The explosion lit the skies, blinding both humans and aliens. The Sun Killer cracked, its energy spilling like fire across the void. The warlord screamed in fury, ordering his fleets to stabilize it. But it was too late. The weapon was broken, its power unstable. It collapsed in on itself, dragging dozens of ships into the blaze. The monsters on Earth roared louder, their cries victorious, their eyes burning brighter. The survivors wept, for they had seen death in the sky, and it had been stopped. But the cost was not finished. The broken weapon released a storm of energy that struck the planet. Mountains cracked, seas boiled, forests burned. The monsters staggered, their bodies scarred by the blast. Some fell, sinking into oceans, collapsing into valleys. Others stood tall, their roars defiant even as fire tore through them. Earth itself shook, crying in pain, and the survivors knew the price of vengeance was not over. The warlord still lived, his command ship broken, but burning with rage. He screamed across the stars. His voice carried into every fleet. Destroy them. Destroy everything, no survivors. But his words carried no power now. His fleets were scattered, his armies broken. And worse, his soldiers had seen fear. They had seen their god bleed, and when gods bleed, empires fall. On Earth, silence fell once more. Not the silence of surrender, but the silence after thunder. The survivors stepped from caves, from ruins, from shadows. They saw the wreckage of fleets burning in the skies. They saw the monsters still moving, some collapsing into the ground, some sinking into oceans, some standing like mountains that would never fall. And they understood Earth had survived. But it was no victory. For every monster awakened, the Earth grew weaker. The rivers dried further, the forests blackened, the air thick with smoke. The survivors felt it, their bones heavy, their breath short. They knew the truth. The monsters were not saviors. They were the price of survival, and Earth had paid it. In the final hours, a transmission was sent, not from the warlord, not from Vaylor, not from the survivors, but from Earth itself. The signal carried across the stars, reaching further than any alien fleet. It was not words at first, but roars, storms, quakes, the very voice of the planet. Then, through the static, came a message in human tongue, a voice that was not one voice, but many, a chorus of those who had lived and died. If you come to Earth, remember this. This planet does not forgive. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Worlds listened, empires trembled. Some laughed, thinking it only myth, but others remembered the fall of fleets. The silence of Earth's vengeance and fear spread, not fear of humans, but fear of their legacy. The survivors heard the message too. They wept, for it was both victory and curse. They had lived, but at a price no one could count. They looked at the monsters, standing in ruins, glowing eyes watching the horizon, and they understood the final truth. Earth had not unleashed its monsters to protect its people. Earth had unleashed them to remind the galaxy, this world may break, but it will never bow. And in the silence that followed, the monsters roared one last time, a roar that carried into the stars, a roar that would echo in fear across galaxies, a roar that became Earth's last message.